Howdy. As SpongeBob's co-worker and neighbor, there's been a lot of episodes revolving around Squidward. The poor guy is the straight man in a town that's simply too energetic, positive, and sometimes stupid for his liking. But anyway, let's look back at what I consider the top 5 worst and best Squidward episodes. And just a note ahead, I'll try and save the episodes I've previously covered for the honorable mentions, as I like to try and offer you as much variety as I can. Anyway, on to the countdown. For the 5th worst,
You seem tense.
Good Neighbors. But the term horrible neighbors is definitely more applicable in this episode. And by the end, I legitimately wanted to see Squidward move out of Bikini Bottom, just to give the poor guy some well-earned peace. The episode begins on Sunday morning. We immediately start with SpongeBob breaking into Squiddy's house to bug him. And unlike usual, it doesn't feel well-meaning. This is definitely one of those cases where I couldn't help but feel bad for Squidward. The whole way through the episode, he's just trying his best to ignore Spongy and just enjoy his Sunday. Look, he's not bothering anyone.
This is gonna be a heavenly day.
We can watch him begin to relax and enjoy himself, but we know his enjoyment is just going to be dashed away from him, leaving him miserable for the rest of the episode.
I only have half an hour of me time left, and the idiots took my house.
I also didn't find it particularly clever just seeing Spongy repeatedly break into Squidward's house. When Spongy isn't even given a reason to break into Squidward's house, it just feels like shoddy writing. And the Good Neighbors Club Spongy and Patrick form isn't even remotely interesting. It just feels completely generic.
Let's begin with roll call. Patrick.
Speaks for all of us.
And how is it meant to be any fun to see poor Squiddy lose all of his hard-earned Sunday to SpongeBob and Patrick being annoying? Don't get me wrong, I really enjoy some clever SpongeBob antics, but this just felt witless and tiring. At one point, SpongeBob even assaults Squidward with a spray of paint to his eyes, and he doesn't even apologize or seem to care that Squidward's screaming in pain. Which is simply not the SpongeBob I know. Squidward can't even have his pedicure without SpongeBob and Patrick ruining it. In fact, they outright steal his pedicure from him after once again breaking into his home.
Mother Star, we better check this guy out. Make sure he's safe for Squidward.
Well, I say he checks out A-okay.
This is a very good example of a dull Squidward episode where I just spent the whole thing wanting the poor guy to get a break. Spongy, he clearly doesn't enjoy his job. Just let him have his relaxing Sunday, you two, and stop being jerks.
I guess we aren't good neighbors after all.
No, you're not.
No, you aren't!
In this episode anyway, you two are horrible neighbors. It even ends with Squidward forced to do community service on every Sunday for the rest of his life. That is just awful.
This'll be great! The 3 of us cleaning up Bikini Bottom!
As a friend of mine would say, this isn't SpongeBob. This is Scumbob.
Aye, guest sir.
Krusty Towers. Now this was exactly what I hoped for from the title. Essentially watching an episode of Fawlty Towers with SpongeBob. The story probably won't surprise you. Krabs decided he can empty more money out of people's wallets by hiring out rooms. So he turns the Krusty Krab into Krusty Towers. And who should be their first customer but Patrick? And he has only the stupidest possible request to ask our reluctant Squiddy hero.
Why would I give you a bubble bath?
Well, because Mr. Krabs said you would.
But he has to do them, because the hotel's motto is...
We shall never deny a guest, even the most ridiculous request.
But the episode isn't just purely Squidward suffering. He actually gets Krabs back for his stupid, greedy scheme. In fact, Squiddy finally does what he probably should have done 4 years ago.
Hey, you can't take that elevator! You're an employee!
Not anymore. I quit.
Quit! You can't quit!
And seeing him finally quit is frankly very satisfying. Like, good on you for standing up to Krabs, man. And his first move is to do the most cathartic thing we could possibly see him do, subjecting Mr. Krabs, now 1 employee short, to the same torture he was put through. Unlike Good Neighbors, where Squidward is just made to suffer the whole way through, Squiddy actually gets a little revenge here, and his elaborate requests are hilariously creative to see. From having Krabs carry him to his room, to requesting Krabs eat a toenail clippings patty, it's also satisfying to see. In fact, some of these elaborate requests are so good, I don't even want to spoil them for you. I say, just go enjoy the service of Krusty Towers for yourself. I give it 5 stars for chuckles.
I'll need some help with my bags.
How can you have bags? You just found out this is a hotel.
This is a hotel?
Go, Steve, go!
And the 4th worst Squidward episode is Cephalopod Lodge. This one has made it to a few people's worst episodes ever lists, so let's take a closer look at it together. The notorious Season 6. Full of cringy, unpleasant, boring episodes. Though there were exceptions, Spongy's writing just wasn't always as strong in this season. Anyway, here we learn that every second Wednesday, Squidward is actually cheery.
Squidward, are you okay?
Oh, I couldn't be better.
Apparently, this is cause for concern from SpongeBob and Krabs, so Spongy and Patrick go to spy on him, to see if they can ruin his happiness, I guess? I don't know, they seem to have forgotten to give them motives here. You see, it turns out Squidward is a Freemason, and the secret club gets together every fortnight to do their secret rituals.
This almost makes the other 353 days worth living for.
But of course, SpongeBob and Patrick intrude upon the ceremony, and Squidward gets kicked out of the Freemasons. And how does SpongeBob respond to this? All he does is ask,
Do we get to join the lodge?
"Oh, come on, Spongy, really?" I mean, at least in Are You Happy Now, I can appreciate that SpongeBob is actively trying to help Squidward, and isn't the sole cause of his lack of happy memories. Here, Squidward clearly points out,
The last thing in my life I really enjoyed. And SpongeBob ruined it too.
even when I saw this as a kid, I just felt sad for Squiddy the whole way through. To their credit, Spongy and Patrick do try to get Squidward back in, but when that fails, they immediately go back to making him miserable for the rest of the episode. Most of the time, they're just faffing about trying to come up with stupid rituals for their own new club that Squidward doesn't care about.
Patty cake, Sailor Man! Bake me a cake as fast.
SpongeBob!
Jeez, you two, can the guy not seriously even mourn the loss of the last thing that made him happy? But then, something unbelievable happens. Get this, SpongeBob and Patrick knock on Squidward's door rather than just breaking in. Astounding! Only to kidnap him and assault him with electrocution to the tongue. Ugh. Like, seriously, this has to be among the dumbest things that SpongeBob and Patrick have ever done. Purposely electrocuting themselves with jellyfish on the tongue to cause massive tongue swelling. Spongy, this behavior is disappointing your fans like me. Fans that believe you have an intellectual capacity larger than Patrick. Though there is one thing I did like about this episode. The giant sock joke at the end is kinda neat. I always enjoy seeing the show integrate live action in creative ways. But overall, at 9 years old, I disliked this episode. And as an adult, I somehow disliked it even more.
Go, Steve, go!
And for the 4th best, Tentacle Vision. Poor Squidward just loved early morning access TV before they cancelled his favourite show.
Has been cancelled.
So he decides to make his own show on TV. Ha, I'm smiling already. But of course, SpongeBob and Patrick crash his show and make it a mess.
Squidward's on TV?
In fact, all our favourite characters pop in for a little spotlight. Krabs steps in for a little shameless self-promotion, and Sandy shows off her lion dancing moves, Texas style. And as if the episode couldn't get any better, then Pearl steps in with her cheer routine, my absolute favourite minor character. And of course, this all-star cast isn't complete on public broadcast, without a little wanton destruction from Plankton. Soon, the whole of Bikini Bottom joins in on the show, and we end up with something more cheery and hilariously spontaneous to watch unfold than even Squidward's best show could have delivered.
Patrick, get down here. As I was saying, Today,
Tentacle Vision reminds me a lot of that Daffy Duck episode Duck Amuck, where Daffy Duck is constantly trying to get the cartoonist to play ball so he can have a coherent story. But something always seems to go wrong, except here, instead of just Bugs Bunny trolling Daffy, it's every citizen in Bikini Bottom trolling Squidward. I definitely call Tentacle Vision among Squidward's best episodes. If you like seeing all of the Spongy crew come together at once, I can definitely recommend this one. And the third worst Squidward episode is
You seem tense.
Boating Buddies. I do wish I enjoyed watching Squidward being made miserable, because if I did, I'd be up the wazoo with Squidward episodes to recommend to you. So we start with SpongeBob, shocker, irritating Squidward. And once again, Squidward's just trying to have a quiet couple of hours to himself, leading to him desperately running from SpongeBob, trying to just get one free moment of peace.
That was a recumbent bicycle, and I sold it.
Why?
So I can get further away from you!
Squidward is amidst a desperate drive to get away from SpongeBob, only to be pulled over by the police. Unfortunately, this forces him to go back to boating school, and we all get one guess who he has to sit next to.
Oh, Squidward!
I guess the main problem I had with this episode is that the jokes are really weak. They meander on, and they don't seem to lead anywhere. Like, there's one skit that runs for a good 2 minutes, with Squidward and SpongeBob drawing these long, big diagrams on the chalkboard to illustrate why they were in boating school. And it's a skit that is only kept alive by the exceptional voice performance of Tom Kenny and Roger Bumpus. The writing itself, though, has zero punchline. I mean, a good quarter of that time doesn't even have voice acting. It's all drowned out in a way that feels like the episode ended up being too short, and they had to go back to find a way to add a full half minute without having to work too hard. I mean, you can probably already guess that SpongeBob ends up crashing Squidward and Mrs. Puff into something. Squidward has to suffer more pain and is forced to stay another week at boating school with SpongeBob. Exactly what he never deserved. Writers, just give poor Squiddy his license back and end this episode. This has to be the biggest problem I have with these bad Squidward episodes. Squidward's misery has no purpose or reason to it. But I guess in the end, this whole episode didn't have much of a purpose.
You got any extra mustard in there?
And for the third best, Dying for Pie.
Thanks.
Huh, we certainly hit the ground running with the suspense in this episode. You see, it finally happened. Squidward accidentally poisoned SpongeBob. Working in the Krusty Krab for so long, it's flabbergasting it took this long.
The boy cries, you sweater of tears, and you kill him.
You see, in his hasty effort to find SpongeBob a co-worker present, Squidward buys him a pie, not realizing it's actually a bomb in disguise. But before he can warn him, Spongy apparently wolfs down the whole thing.
Thanks for the pie, Squidward.
But actually, this turn of events leads to one of the most touching and profound episodes between SpongeBob and Squidward. You see, for probably the first time, we see Squidward fully living in the moment, embracing a friendship with SpongeBob, assuming that today is SpongeBob's last day on Earth.
He's only got until sunset. Why ruin his last day on Earth?
And Squiddy really tolerates it all. In perhaps the most selfless he has ever been, he does everything SpongeBob wants to do.
I want to show you my best friend, Squidward.
Hey, Frank.
And you can probably imagine some of the things that would involve. Yet the list of things Spongy wants to do somehow still took me by surprise. And I've been watching this cheery yellow dishcloth's antics for over 20 years now. And watching Squidward be subjected to all this with complete acceptance had me laughing the whole way. It's an episode that is simultaneously funny, creative, and beautiful at the same time, while also giving us a surprising amount of character development. It's one of the strongest examples I've seen that when push comes to shove, Squidward cares about his co-worker.
Oh, yeah.
And the second worst Squidward episode is Breath of Fresh Squidward. SpongeBob is horrible in this episode. Not only is he at his most obnoxious and torturing Squidward, but he ends up lashing out at Squidward when he's done nothing wrong. I very rarely see SpongeBob be this intentionally nasty to Squidward. You know, I've noticed a habit with bad Squidward episodes. Generally, they start with SpongeBob breaking into Squidward's house. We're in the midst of season 5 here, which sadly also had quite a few duds. And I felt SpongeBob had lost a lot of his wit and insight during this period. You see, it turns out SpongeBob and Patrick watch Squidward sleep every morning from 3:30 a.m. Charming.
You sneak into my house every morning!
So Squidward does the sensible thing and installs an electric fence around his house. And frankly, after 4 years of a neighbor repeatedly breaking in, I consider that a sensible idea too. As we'd expect though, they get in anyway, and Squidward ends up accidentally zapping himself with a fence, resulting in him losing all the storm clouds from his mind, and becoming a more cheery, relaxed, carefree person.
Good night, Bikini Bottom! I love you!
At first, even if it's artificial, I was just glad to see Squidward enjoying life for a change. But even when Squidward is finally acting kind to everyone, this mid-season SpongeBob is never happy unless his co-worker is miserable. From the feedback I've heard from others, it's pretty unanimous that SpongeBob is at his worst here. The SpongeBob I know would just be glad to see Squidward content for a change, possibly concerned about the head trauma. Anyway, I mean, for like the first time ever, Squidward gets Employee of the Month. And apparently we're meant to feel sorry for SpongeBob because of this?
Wow, SpongeBob, you've been Employee of the Month a gazillion times. I wish I could be Employee of the Month.
Dude, just let Squidward have this, man. He even makes arguably the most nasty outburst he has ever made, demanding Squidward leave his own party because he's pogo sticking with Patrick?
Now do yourself a big fat favor and get out, bub!
And everyone just lets SpongeBob kick Squidward out. Why though? Because terrible writing demands it? The ultimate injustice is done here. When Squidward finally feels some contentment in his life, SpongeBob just wants him to be miserable again. That is so left field of what we're accustomed to from SpongeBob. And I think I'd call his treatment of Squidward here on par with his treatment of Gary in A Pal for Gary. I personally consider this among the absolute worst written Squidward episodes ever written on the show. And for the second best of Squidward, Squidville. I consider this episode important because it gives us a lot of insight into Squidward's character, and that at heart, he can actually sometimes appreciate the chaos SpongeBob brings to his life. In fact, he's perhaps even grown to need it in his life. And it's a reminder of that age-old lesson from Oscar Wilde. The only thing worse than not getting what you want is getting it.
It makes you think.
No, it doesn't.
You see, Squidward finally moves away, and at first, he's ecstatic, loving the peace, quiet, and routine he can get in. But soon, he begins to realize that he misses the craziness and interesting days Spongy brought to him, because Squidward has finally been given something he's never had in his life before. Stability, and to some people, stability can be very boring and monotonous.
I sorta don't feel like playing my clarinet today.
Oh man, when you hear Squidward say that, you know something's wrong. And he essentially becomes the new SpongeBob of Squidville, until they finally kick him out. This is when he realizes that he may not always like Bikini Bottom, but he actually fits in pretty well there. A big thing I like about this episode is that it gives off that feel of being stuck with yourself. I think a lot of us have these moments where we want to be alone with ourselves, and maybe we even enjoy it from time to time. But when it's all you have for such a long period of time, it can definitely give a feeling of emptiness for some people. And I really get that feeling from Squidward's montage. Squidward not only gets what he wants by being surrounded by people exactly like him, he ends up genuinely alone because of it. Like Squidward, these people aren't all exactly friendly.
Could you pipe down over there, iron lung?
But anyway, there's some real sprinkling of early season SpongeBob charm throughout this episode. Even the beginning reef blower animation jokes had me smiling with their creativity. And for some reason, I just really dig Squidward's analogy here. It's awesome.
I would rather tear out my brainstem, carry it into the middle of the nearest four-way intersection, and skip rope with it, than go on living where I do now.
There's also satisfaction in seeing Squidward finally get what he's wanted for so many years. Peace, quiet, and some routine in his life. And this new side of Squidward we've never seen before gives us a lot of insight into his character. That if things ever did calm down for him, he'd probably be the type to throw a few pranks and antics. Needless to say, he goes back to Bikini Bottom. Though still, Squiddy, surely you could have at least given yourself a couple of weeks here occasionally? Or maybe visit SpongeBob on weekends or evenings instead of moving out completely. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm an Asperger's introvert, but I find it really hard to see him walk away from this much peace and quiet. And before we get to the number ones, just a couple of quick honorable mentions. These may have been mentioned before, or not quite fit into any category. Ink Lemonade. This one more than applies for the worst list, but I've discussed it before in the worst and best modern SpongeBob episodes, so I decided to give it a skip. Are you happy now? As I mentioned in modern SpongeBob episodes, I actually personally didn't mind this one. I felt it shined a relatively realistic light on depression in Squidward's inability to feel emotions. Yes, eventually he was made to feel rage, but at least he was feeling something. And personally, I found it touching how SpongeBob tried his best to help Squidward amidst his depressive episode. Yes, it's certainly not a best contender, but personally, I've seen SpongeBob do way worse episodes than this. Band Geeks. Yeah, this one stars Squidward. I'd call this Squidward episode. Many people can probably agree this is not only among the best Squidward episodes, but the best episodes in the whole series. But I already discussed it in best SpongeBob episodes, so I decided to skip it to talk about some less well-known episodes. And I've also covered Little Yellow Book. Lousy episode, enough said. Suction Cup Symphony. I personally consider this episode severely underrated. It's a great little example of SpongeBob and Patrick's shenanigans benefiting Squidward's work, and that's something pretty rare from this show. And it doesn't half-job Harry that attempt either. It's relatable. I think a good portion of us know what it's like to try and work in a noisy environment. Squidward's expressions as he tries to drown out SpongeBob and Patrick's noise is portrayed in a way where I could really relate to that pain. Anyway, on to the number ones. And I think the number one worst Squidward episode is Choir Boys. Oh my jeebus multi-tentacled overgod. I have never seen such a sloppy, slow-paced, broken episode of SpongeBob. Choir Boys is a true novelty in how impressively boring it is. Yet it's like watching a disaster at the same time. Imagine a blimp crash. A very slow blimp crash turned down to 1/10 of its usual speed. Because the name of the game in Choir Boys is sandbagging. And lots of it. Where to start? The entire first half of the episode is just very slowly watching Squidward shower, leave the house, slowly talk with SpongeBob, slowly put his bike helmet on, SpongeBob repeatedly begging to come along with Squidward and he stalls longer for time. Squidward says no. SpongeBob doesn't listen, and holy Toledo, we're at the halfway point. Are we going to do anything here, guys?
Sorry, Strider, not gonna happen.
No? Okay. Where's even SpongeBob's motive here? Despite Squidward repeatedly telling SpongeBob he can't come along to the audition, well, he just does it anyway. For no real reason either. Not exactly stellar writing there, guys. And the rest of the episode is just dedicated to SpongeBob refusing to let Squidward have this one thing that makes him happy, and doing everything he can to sabotage him. Yet somehow he's managing to sabotage him so slowly, so agonizingly slow. And did I mention how badly these two characters sing? I'm sure the voice actors intentionally made them sound tone deaf, but they did a really talented job making them sound bad. I am just bewildered how they could draw a 10-minute SpongeBob episode out this much.
And SpongeBob lying sprawled across the dirt.
Maybe they were doing animation cutbacks for this one, as a surprising portion of the episode is just still scene shots of SpongeBob and Squidward talking and singing.
You are not going to keep me from performing my grand solo.
I'm afraid he's really gonna try, buddy, and our ears are going to have to suffer in the process. Probably the worst of this ear-grinding garbage is when SpongeBob does a long Figaro note that seriously goes on for like half a minute. Though I want to be clear, this is nothing against Tom Kenny, Spongie's voice actor.
Ready. I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready.
Or Squidward's voice actor, Roger Bumpus. I deeply respect them both, and they have talent in spades. Even just to hold that Figaro note takes one amazing voice box. But I just never thought SpongeBob or Squidward had the voice to sing opera, and I definitely don't now. There's just something very weird about the structure of this episode. They basically do nothing for like 10 minutes apart from go to a recital and sing. With so many long, drawn-out scenes, it feels like I'm watching a SpongeBob parody that was written in 20 minutes while sandbagging. But worst of all the sandbagging has to be Squidward clearing his throat for like 30 seconds. How did he get away with that in SpongeBob Season 6? Oh, jeebus, Squidward, get on with it! I've never before seen an episode of SpongeBob this sloppy. I either somehow missed this episode as a kid, or it was so cataclysmically boring that I somehow blotted it from my memory for all eternity. Anyway, I can comfortably call Choir Boys the most boring, sad, annoying, broken Squidward episode I've ever seen. And I think the #1 best Squidward episode is Idiot Box. Goodness, Band Geeks may have been Squidward's most glorious moment, but I think Idiot Box is Squidward's most glorious performance. You see, Squidward's performance really shines here. Half of the joy of this one is just watching Squidward's reactions to the insanity he can hear going on.
You'll have to cut them off with a saw.
No, Patrick, I can't do that.
Why not?
Because I already cut off my own arms.
This is just good old, simple, early season fun. Squidward basically drives himself insane watching SpongeBob and Patrick have fun with nothing.
How are you two making that noise?
Ah! What noise, Squidward?
I can only hear the sound of our laughter.
And of course, this episode also spawned the universal SpongeBob meme.
Imagination.
The story here is SpongeBob and Patrick buy a massive TV, apparently just so they can play with the box. Squidward understandably thinks this is an unusual decision. But of course, SpongeBob says that with the box alone, all they need is
Imagination.
And the rest of the episode is just watching Squidward's mix of emotions, from concern to confusion to going insane with curiosity, wanting desperately to understand SpongeBob and Patrick's imagination adventures. But this isn't the kind of Squidward torment where it's unpleasant. It's just awesome watching him try to unravel this mystery and driving himself insane in the process. So much comedy in this show comes purely from Squidward's straight man act to SpongeBob's craziness, and I think this is the ultimate episode to showcase that. Like a lot of good Squidward/SpongeBob episodes, it reminds us of an important lesson. Life is 20% what happens to you, and 80% how you respond to it. Squidward just sees a box. SpongeBob, he sees space pirates. Apparently, all Squidward needs is a little
Imagination.
What else can be said about Idiot Box? It's simply creative, funny, and fantastically performed. I chuckle every time I watch this episode, and personally, I can consider it my favorite Squidward episode.
Squidward finally made the box work after all. That is so great.
Well, thanks for popping by to check out these Squidward/SpongeBob episodes with me. If you'd like to mention a Squidward episode you think I missed, or you have any recommendations for future top lists, feel free to mention them in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.